Going. Everybody, thank you so much for coming again. I know for me, these are super helpful and awesome. I'll give a quick overview. If you guys don't know Ben and Jason, I'm sure most of you do, but I think these are both super awesome guys to have on right now. So just really quick about Ben. Ben grew up in Provo. He's got a BA in philosophy at the U of U, went to law school at BYU. He's a JAG for the Utah National Guard. Ben's been investing since 2002. He's bought everything from HUD homes, bank-owned, bulk REOs, foreclosure auctions, seller finance, short sales, all of it. So he's entitled land, built homes, flipped houses, wholesale houses, and is a landlord. So Ben's entitled over 1,600 residential units and 3 storage facilities. So he's going to have some good insight, especially as it maybe relates to land, but all of this stuff as well. And then Jason, I think, is one of the best wholesalers in the state and just an all-around awesome guy. I predict one day Jason will be completely out of his shell and in front of people all the time. When we were at Mike Baird's Smarter Tribe Real Estate, I told Jason, I said, you've got to get in front of more people, man. What you say is gold. And he's easing into it. If you guys didn't see it,
I'm making progress.
There you go. I love it. I love it. So Jason also got ahead of it and did a really awesome YouTube video like a week ago, which I posted. And so I think his message, he's going to repeat a lot of what he said there. Anyway, I'm happy to have you both on. Thank you guys so much for coming. And we'll do kind of like I did the last couple of times when I had Mike Baird and Jeff Brelio and Kip and Clay Rockwood on. I'll try and kind of mediate and kind of facilitate some discussion between you two, and we'll keep it to an hour and keep it packed with good content. I'll also post just kind of like little resource pages. I mean, I don't know, like these for me are actually helpful to just remind me of what good books are out there and stuff like that. I've asked Jason and Ben to kind of contribute their kind of go-to sources, and then some input I've had from other people that have posted stuff on Facebook. So different books or whatever how-tos or things that keep you motivated or add value to your life. So with that being said, Jason and Ben, what I'd like you guys to each do in order is just kind of add on to anything I just said about you or your background, or just kind of more of a personal introduction, and then we'll get into some questions. So Jason, let's start with you.
I think you did a great job. The one thing I would add is I wouldn't say that I necessarily have like the standard personality of a real estate investor, right? Like I think most of your real estate investors are like the go-getter, like high sales type. If you're talking in like terms of DISC, like high D, high I types, right? Like lovers, things like that. So I don't fit that mold. I'm more like security driven, more of a measure twice, cut once type of person. And so while growing this real estate thing that I've been growing, I've been very aware that what goes up must come down, and making sure that I've done everything I can to prepare for it, and have been an ardent student of market corrections and just any different thing that could come that would put my security of growing this thing at risk. So I would say I probably put more time into this than most of making sure to navigate this whole thing well.
Awesome. Thank you. Ben.
I think I share a lot with Jason. I'm definitely introverted. I like to say the word that I got actually came from Roger Jacobson. There's hammers and there's thinkers that succeed in real estate investing. I'm definitely a thinker. I'm not a hammer. I'm not a high sales guy. I mean, not a lot of people know a lot about me. I've done really good at getting out of my shell in the last decade and getting out there, but I'm definitely introverted. It's definitely something I have to prepare for. This morning I did my mental exercises to be ready for this presentation, but I'm definitely a think twice, cut once, measure twice, cut once kind of guy too. So I think that there's room for everybody to succeed. But I'm definitely more of a gambler than Jason is. I think I don't care about security. My wife cares more about security than I do. So I've taken some steps to shore that up, but I'm definitely a gambler. I want to throw those dice. I want to do the big deals. I want to have some fun.
This is great. This is really serendipitous, to be honest with you, because whatever I'm doing here, like it's kind of planned, but it's not planned. And I'm kind of going in the moment of who I'm feeling like. And so it's kind of funny that Ben and Jason are on this today, because one, I really got to know each of them more in person at Mike Baird's Smarter Tribe, retreat that we had last year. And it does actually turn out you guys are both kind of similar in your personalities, a little bit more introverted, but both super, super smart with a lot to say when you're willing to say it. Right. So, okay, let's get right into it. Jason, I know you have a lot to say about, about what's going on now, what you could do, what you're doing now, what's the best play if you're a flipper, a wholesaler, a landlord. Before we jump right into that, because I know a lot of people on the last call had some questions about land. And so, Ben, we're not going to spend maybe a ton of time on this, but I also want to get Jason's take, because you, in our little pre-notes, you have a question for Jason about this, and we're not going to be able to cover all of these things in super depth, right? So I'd encourage everybody to reach out after the call to ping Jason or Ben or whatever to get drilled down further on some of their ideas. But let's talk about land, specifically a short-term play on land, as you see it, Ben, and maybe a long-term play on land. And then what I want Jason to be thinking about, and maybe you're doing it or not doing it, but how could you come about land in reaction to what Ben's going to talk about in terms of your mindset as a wholesaler, a marketer, a sales kind of guy, right? So Ben, maybe first tackle quickly your short-term ideas on land, and then your long-term ideas on land, because I love what you're going to talk about on long-term.
Sure. So I have, right now I have 4 kind of major developments. We recently sold at the end of February. We signed a contract to sell. We had partners, and we signed a contract for all of our interest in those deals to our partners so that we could shore up a whole lot of cash. We're also working on a couple of other ones that we have preset deals with builders that have cash, so that we're not really going into the development stage. So if you look at land, there's the entitlement stage, which is buying what you buy, and then there's kind of the development stage, which is the rehab. Land eats 3 meals a day. So if you keep that and you put that money into the rehab, you better be able to cover those 3 meals. And right now, our portfolio, we want to make sure that we can cover the 3 meals on the ones we're keeping.
Okay, so review those 3 meals really quick.
Well, taxes. You don't get cash flow off of land typically. Certainly not enough to cover your nut. And if you're not buying with cash, you got a mortgage too. And they're going to keep coming at you for money. And if it's not like a house, I can't say, oh, I'm going to go rent this and then I'll renegotiate with my hard money lender and we'll figure this out. It's simply, it's going to take money from you. And if you can't cover it, you're going to lose it.
Got it. So the three then that you had, if you're going to list 3 specifically, taxes, mortgage, and what was the other one?
No, so it's actually a quote from Keith Cunningham that it eats 3 meals a day. It's not 3 particular things. It's
got
just
it. It's just always eating. It's just always eating.
Yeah.
It's always eating. That is such a good analogy with land, right? And so, because you're right, you got to, and I really like your comment about maybe rearranging your structure with those you're partnering with. Maybe give me one quick example of what you did there, where you maybe didn't have to put as much of your cash into it, or you got some of it out of it to be a little bit more conservative with your cash.
So I like to partner with Arrive Homes. They're kind of a Utah County company. They're pretty big, but they do have cash available. I like to partner with them so that I set the deal up and they bring in the money for all the repairs, all of the improvements. So I'm not out that money for the improvements. I just bring in the loan and the deal and the equity, and then they bring in all the improvements, and then I partner with them that way.
Awesome. So you're finding the deal, you're setting it up. You're maybe not getting as much as you could have if you were doing it 100% yourself, but you're reducing your risk.
Yeah, and my cash in too.
Right, and your cash in. Jason, from your perspective in your world, what comments might you have as regards to land? I don't know how much you do with land. We'll obviously jump into houses in a minute, but.
Yeah, I would defer to Ben on this. I don't focus on land. I wholesaled 1 lot. It was for $10K that was up in a rural East Weber County area. So I would say I probably am not the expert on land. I'd give Ben more time.
Okay, cool. Well, let's jump in. Jason, what would be, I know you and I talked about this a lot. What would be maybe if you could, cover, what was your one main takeaway after you look back on your YouTube video? Like, what did you get the most feedback from? What was one question or one comment that seemed to ring true even after, rethinking about your comments on that YouTube video?
I would say just go by principles, right?
Okay.
There are certain principles that are true regardless of market. So one true principle is Utah has a supply and demand problem. So we lack, when it comes to supply and demand, there is more people interested in buying houses than there is houses to buy. So you can use that to project long-term what values of real estate are going to be. Nobody knows what values of real estate are going to be in a month, 6 months, a year, but pretty much everybody smart that I know agrees that 3 to 5 years from now, things are worth a good chunk more than they are today. Real estate produces cash flow. So you just need to be smart in all of your choices. So for me, even though I am a cautious and conservative person, I am buying 2 homes to flip this week. I'm sending out homes for wholesale. I'm buying a home to get the tenants out and then turn around and sell after the fact, because I believe in the fundamentals of Utah real estate. And so it's just having an understanding of, what does this look like if it goes well? What does this look like if it doesn't go well? And am I okay with both options? So I agree that in real estate, along with land, anywhere where you can partner with somebody who can bring in the cash and make a little bit less, do that. Because in times of market adjustment and things like that, cash, I think Tom Kroll, a guy out of Florida, said, Jesus is king, but cash is really, really important in times like this.
That's a great quote. Someone throw that in the chat. That's a great quote.
So cash is near king as well. So you want to preserve your cash as much as you can, because as markets tighten, the people with cash are the people that win.
Well, let's go along that. No, that's awesome. Let's go along that thread for a minute, because you and I have talked about this, Jason. And Ben, let's get your take on this. Preserving your cash. What tips or tricks do you have, whether it's right now where there's maybe a little anxiety or panic, or just in general? Like what tips or tricks might you have in preservation of cash?
This one I can give an answer on.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll go to Ben and then we'll come right back to you.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing is focusing on those cash flowing assets. We're actually about to start construction. I'm submitting the final paperwork to the bank to submit to our storage units for construction, because storage units produce cash and they produce gobs of cash. So if you have a $800,000 house, you might be looking at selling that to somebody who that fits their portfolio. If you're looking at a $280,000 house, that's something that's going to cash flow, and cash are very important. I like partnering. There's a lot of people on here with money. There's a lot of people on here who want to do smart deals. Partner with people. Find somebody who has more. There are guys out there. Look, I do pretty well for myself, but there are guys out there with hundreds of millions of dollars. There are tens of millions of dollars all over the place in Utah. And they want to do deals, and they will bring in the cash to do the deals for you. It's all about negotiations right now.
That's awesome. And then before we go to Jason, guys, I can see that are on this group call right now. John Prince and Tim Watke. I mean, I don't know everything that Tim does exactly, but I know that John and Tim get creative with that, partnering with people, doing deals and bringing other people's cash in on larger deals, not just on, the single family home type stuff. All right, Jason, add to it.
Yeah. So preservation of capital. First, times like this, in my opinion, and this is like, I'm going to start with like the least sexy thing, right? So now's a good time to get lean in your personal finances as well as in your business expenses, right? So that razor that you've been wanting, now's really not a good time to buy no doodad buying, and figure out how you can cut some of the fat off of both of those things. There's certain things that I suggest you do not cut expenses on. One would be anything that you've been doing in terms of lead generation that's been working, because I think a mistake that people make in times like this is they say, I'm not going to spend any more money on my lead generation, but opportunities are just as high now. And the other would be any type of like mastermind or group or like self-improvement coach type of thing that you have. You don't want to cut those out right now. In terms of preservation of capital, one thing I did was I pulled all of my home equity lines of credit out, and I'm choosing to pay the interest on it. That's something I heard from multiple people from a big mastermind called Collective Genius that I'm in, of people that are around multiple market cycles. They said, hey, in 2008, we thought we were set because we had all these home equity lines of credit, but the banks reached out to us and said, hey, sorry, your home equity line of credit isn't available to you anymore. But when it's in your account, and if you want to take it even to the next step, pull it out, stick it in a different bank, then you're doubly safe and you just have access to that. So I'm choosing to pay the interest on it rather than, even though I'm not necessarily using it. Also, I'm using what smart leverage I can. So on all of these homes that I'm buying them with first position hard money loans, and I'm covering part of it down and the rehabs as well. So yeah, cut your expenses, preserve as much capital as you can, and partner, I would say would be a good summary of that.
Cool. And Jason, I did the exact same thing like 2 weeks ago. Part of it was just to like psychologically make me feel better, you know.
100%.
Yeah, that's huge, right? Like you got to keep you got to keep positive. And so I pulled every available line I possibly had. And for a moment, I'm like, crap, this totally sucks. Like I'm paying interest unnecessarily, but it just made me
sitting in the bank.
No, yeah, it's not unnecessarily. I didn't want to steal Jason's thunder on this because I saw him talk about this in his video, but live way, way, way below your means. Don't live below your means. You want to be an investor, live way below your means. Second of all, I was 23 when Countrywide filed bankruptcy in August of 2007. It was right before my 24th birthday. I had about $200,000 in lines of credit. I had about 20,000 extended. Within a week, my lines of credit were $21,000.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So they gave you $1,000, right? Guys, everyone look at the chat because we're not going to be able to, echo all of these, but everybody's making some really good comments. Yeah. Yeah, so unsecured lines will be pulled out.
When you pull those lines, be super disciplined with those funds. That's a true principle regardless of market, but especially now.
So like the way I've come to terms with it a little bit is, one, to make sure I have those funds in my account makes me feel a little bit comfortable going, okay, if this goes on for a little bit, I got some lunch money there. But the other thing where, like some of the things I'll pay for cash, like say my rehab monies or something like that, I basically just internally, I still want to account for that. I just now assume that that's debt that I pulled on my rehab or my marketing, whereas otherwise maybe I wouldn't because it would have been the cash, right? So what I'm doing is I am still accounting for that interest and charging it to one of my properties just so I can, expense it somewhere, right? So that's one tip maybe that I've been doing. Hey, Ben, I had a question for you. When you opened, you kind of talked about how you're a little bit of a gambler, right? Like, or, a little bit of a risk taker, right? So how do you merge your risk taking, tendencies right now with what we just talked about preservation of cash or being careful with the money that you have?
So the first thing is you have to take care of yourself mentally. It's really easy to get caught up in what you read and things and stop taking action or be scared. Whether you're a hammer or a thinker, you got to be taking action. However, if you're a gambler like I am, I went through the last recession. I lost a lot of money. I helped a lot of people out and it never came back to me for years. But that put a lot of pressure on my marriage. When I got married, I was already doing pretty well. I was a full-time investor. And then all of a sudden, all of our money froze up and all we had was a couple of rental properties. So it put a lot of pressure, psychological pressure on us. And I wasn't, and my wife wasn't, we weren't doing the mental care that we need. So do the mental care that you need so you're making smart decisions. And then second of all, since then, you know, I went to law school. I now take a very conservative approach. Between my family with different entities, we own 3 different companies. The first one is a lending company, and the second one is an operating company, and the third one is an ownership company. So my lending company lends all of the money that I need to do deals, nearly all, to my ownership company, who signs a management agreement with my management company. And I parse out the earnings that I have throughout those 3 companies. My lending company is the most profitable by far. But it loans money so that if I get sued, if a deal goes bad, I'm not signing personal guarantees on nearly any of my properties. And if a deal goes bad in particular, I still have, you know, my rentals, I still have my cash flowing assets in a separate entity. And in that entity, even the money that's been put into those projects is usually lent from a third party. So you can do smart things to protect your assets and separate your risks from your cash flows. I would really recommend talking to Jeff Brelio about this more. I practice a little bit, but he practices a lot, and this is a lot of what he does. And it's a really good time to start separating your liabilities and your incomes.
Awesome. That is great. And Andy Coates, he's another awesome dude from Utah County, a hard money lender. He asked the question I was just going to ask, but I'm actually going to ask it to Jason, because you touched on it a little bit, Jason, on where to, you know, throttle or pedal to the metal on spending money and where to lay off. But one of the things you talked about was self-improvement, your masterminds, your stuff like that. And so Andrew's question is, what examples of mental care? That'll go along lines with that, right, Jason? How are you approaching this from like a mental health, like what are you feeding yourself with and what groups are you a part of? Maybe people would be interested.
Yeah, that's actually based on what Benjamin said at the start. If you wouldn't have asked the question, that was where I was going next, because I think that's honestly one of the most important things any of us can do to weather this whole thing. But one thing before I get into that, I think now would be an excellent time for everyone to look at and implement the book Profit First. That's regardless of market, Profit First is an excellent book that talks about actually making sure you're taking profits from your business and having a separate variety of accounts and things like that to make sure that, you know, your business is producing a profit for you. And where all of us are home a little bit more now, maybe there's some extra reading time. I would highly suggest looking at and implementing Profit First as an entire mastermind collectively. And I've known about Profit First for a while, but as an entire mastermind and collective genius, that's been like our big focus, is implementing Profit First. So in terms of mental care, so here's what I do. Number 1, most important, all of us can do this. Limit media, limit news. Okay. So here's my rules for news. So first off, I say that. Second off, that for me is very, very easy to say, very hard to do. And I've been this way for a while. I've always preached limit media and news, and I've always been very, very drawn to it. I'm that guy that's like past the rubberneck, right? Like you got to see it. And so I've taken the freedom away from myself through an app called Freedom, where during the workday, I cannot look at the news. Every news site known to man is blocked. On my computer, on my phone, on everything. I can check in the evening. If I want to have a stressed out evening because I spent too long looking at the news, I can. But from when I wake up until the evening, I cannot look at it. If I want to go look at it, I have to go look at it on my wife's phone or my wife's computer because it's not even an option. If you are going to look at media, there are some people that sensationalize more than others. I have found that the local news is better than the national news. So my favorite news source is like Deseret News, because they take, for me, they take like a overall, like, hey, here's the information approach, rather than if you get on like Yahoo or CNN or Fox News or anything else where it's like this heavy competition for people's attention nationwide, and whatever the most shocking create an emotion response in you, they'll hit. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I have a business coach. I highly believe in having a business coach. I work through a company called Maps Business Coaching. It's
Sorry,
owned by
Jason,
Gary Keller.
Max?
Maps, MAPS, Maps. So how Maps Business Coaching came to be, Keller Williams, huge real estate company. They also have a huge coaching company, one of the largest coaching companies in the world for real estate agents. Gary Keller said, hey, we've got this coaching thing down for real estate agents. Let's take these principles and apply them for all business owners. So he created Maps Business Coaching. And so they have coaches that kind of specialize in business. So I have a coach there who has helped me a ton with like making the right choices to set all of this up. And then it's staying with, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time around. So that's a Jim Rohn quote. So it's spending time around people that are positive. And it's amazing. You can get deep into a media, like watching a whole bunch of the news and assume like literally the sky is falling, we're all going to die. And then look at what actually happened in the business day and realize like, actually it wasn't that bad. Like actually, no, if you really look at my business fundamentals, like last week was better than normal. So like, which one is it? Is it business is good, or is it the sky is falling and we're all going to die?
I love it. Jason, for a minute, I'm wondering, sometimes when you're talking, there's a little bit of a whistling. While we go to Ben, do you want to maybe try plugging in something different to see if that whistling goes away? It's just like a small little buzz. Ben, give us your quick, highlights about, how you're taking care of your mental health.
Sure. I'm an extreme introvert. So one of the first things that I like to just refer back to, first I like to wake up every morning and do some meditation and go on a walk with my kids. They're out of school. They need the peace. My wife needs the peace. I need the peace. The second thing is I try to consume my media in the morning because that's how I work. One of the main sources, if not the main source of media that I look at, is Johns Hopkins University has a GIS for coronavirus. I like to look at that and just look at the numbers. There's no commentary, there's no opinion, there's no politics. Just look at that and think about that and what it might mean for a while. That's probably my main source of media right now. In the evenings right now, actually right here, see this? This is the very, very top. That's the very, very top of my grandmother's piano. I'm refinishing it right now. It's down here drying to get out of my workshop, but I spend a lot of time in the evenings doing that with my wife. Exercise is a really big one. And then the last two things are in Peter Bevelin's book, Seeking Wisdom, which is a book that's primarily about Charlie Munger, who is Warren Buffett's kind of sidekick. He says that he says, never ask the village barber, whether you need a haircut. And that's kind of the take. Whenever I look at anything in the media, I just have to remember that every single thing I read, everybody has their ulterior motives, and you just have to focus on those and focus on the data, focus on what it means for your business. Look at actually the true economics of it. And then the last thing is I have to focus on fear and anxiety. These emotions that people have, the anguish, the anxiety, the fear, the concern. I've never seen anybody out of fear go to their neighbor and say, hey man, I have an extra roll of toilet paper. Do you need it? People don't do that out of fear. They do it out of love, but there are opportunities. I mean, I saw Randall Wall post that on his Facebook page openly that he has extra toilet paper. That's not coming from fear. And I don't want to be scared. I don't care. I'll go bankrupt. I've been through the worst of the worst. So I don't want to go bankrupt. I want to be somebody who can go out there and share what I have, figure out how to come up with solutions that help the people around me. And that's not going to come from fear and anxiety. So I have to sit down and meditate and think about that and try it. I mean, I've really spent a lot of time with my wife every day, literally every day, to figure out how to get one of my neighbors who's over 60 the groceries they need, how to share my, reasonable supplies of toilet paper. I also have a lot of guns and ammo, so I mean, come at me. But, just those things that are really driving the fear, figure out how to use that to help somebody else alleviate their fear. And then you're not afraid anymore, because they're going to come at you with gratitude, and that gratitude can change your mindset. It will change your mindset.
I love it. I was talking with Andy McFarland this week, and I was just kind of getting his take on things, and he actually kind of came across a little bit of he's very practical, maybe a little bit like Jason, right? Like where he's just like so he's like, Matt, if you didn't listen to the news at all, and he's like, I am literally looking out the window and it's a beautiful day. He's like, it's a beautiful day outside. And, so I think what you guys just said is awesome. And Jason, Mike Baird last call, he talked about take the one idea and implement it. Right now, that's my one idea, is just simply your Freedom app. I am putting that on my phone so that, I do want to be informed, right? Like I don't want to be an idiot and be oblivious to what's going on, but I think that's great. I think we're all going to be way more productive and focused on our business if we just tune out the exterior world and the media, obviously pay attention to it. So I'm going to be using that Freedom app. That is awesome. And then just a reminder, all of these things, I'm making notes of them. I'm going to put them on this little page and share it with everybody. The MAPS business coaching, the different books Ben has talked about and that we've all been talking about. Let's transition a little bit. Or Jason, do you have any comments on that? I know I kind of cut you off with making sure your audio is a little bit better, but
is it better?
Gosh, it's so weird. There's still a little bit of whistling.
Next time Ben talks, I'll go run and grab my headset.
Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna go through the whistle here actually, why don't you do that really quick? Because when I come back to you, I want to talk to you about, because I've been talking to you offline a little bit. I want to hear about your successes, especially this last week and a half. So grab your headset and I'm going to ask Ben that same question. What specific real estate successes have you had? And it doesn't need to be super tangible as far as like, hey, I did this deal, but even if it's like, hey, I learned how to set up, or, I'm transitioning the way I'm thinking about, doing this or whatever it is, right? Like what successes, let's share some wins here for a minute that people might learn from and take an idea from.
Yeah. So first I want to talk really briefly about my overall strategy during the last market crash. I was
Perfect.
diving into deals that took lower equity, lower money out of me so that I could keep my cash. I could keep churning deals and learning. That's one of the reasons I went to law school, was during the last recession. And I focused on learning how to do land. And it's enabled me during this last uptick to really take advantage of that. And it's at least 10x my income since then. And so that's the same thing I'm working on right now. Like I said, in late January, we signed a deal with two of our partners to sell our deals, our equity in the deals. We gave them about a 20% discount on deals that'll take maybe 2 years. And we sold our equity to our partners. That worked out really well, because both our partners on both of those deals had a lot more money than we did. So that's been a big win. And besides that, I've just really been learning how to dive into new markets and to take advantage of changing situations. So right now I spend about 5 or 6 hours a day just learning.
That's awesome. So what's your mindset with that? What's that going to do for the future? I was talking with another lender in California earlier today, and maybe this will piggyback off of kind of where your head's at with it, and everybody has a theory, right? But his theory is, as everything's maybe, even if it's just perceived, right, contracting back right now, right? Like the stock market, whatever, right? Like it's contracting back like a rubber band, right? Like at some point, whether it's just a little bit or a lot, it's going to like explode back, right? So I think this is a great time to do what you're doing, as far as, even if you're not active doing deals right now, you're active preparing for deals that you're going to be doing down the road, right?
Yeah. So in my business, I'm lucky because I only do about 2 deals a year. So it frees up a lot of my time. But those deals could be a lot more profitable. And I'm not necessarily contracting my business. What I'm really trying to focus in on this in on our necessities. I mean, Amazon, I can't even get a bike tire out of Amazon anymore. They say they'll deliver it within 2 days of giving me a date, but they're focusing on those necessities. I can promise you everybody's always going to need a place to live. So if you're in the $800,000 market, maybe that means diving back into the $500,000 market. If you're in the $500,000 market, maybe, I mean, people are always going to need an affordable place to live.
Yeah.
There's just no way that changes. And like Jason said earlier, the fundamentals look great. The economy is good. The supply and demand look great in Utah, but you have to focus on those necessities, not necessarily the frills of real estate, you know, the retail space or the whatever it is, but people need flour, they need sugar, people need a place to live. If you can figure out how to exploit that, people are going to need, I shouldn't say exploit that, that makes it sound negative, but people are going to need solutions. They're going to get job transfers out of state. Maybe learn about seller finance more. If you have never done a seller finance deal, it's time to start learning, because seller finance was bomb in the last recession.
Yeah.
And the difference now is that interest rates have been 4% or 5% instead of 7%. So if you don't know that, learn it, because people need a place to live. They need to leave the state for jobs, and there will be opportunities there.
No, that's great. And while we're waiting for Jason to get back on, I'll kind of comment from my perspective this last week, what I've seen with borrowers, as well as just general activity in the market. You know, I think there was a big knee-jerk reaction this last week when it was a little bit more sensitive, and people were kind of trying to come to terms with what this all meant. I definitely saw deals cancel, like flippers that were set up to buy properties that bailed on it. I mean, I myself actually, with Jason's help, we're around on these and get them done. But we had some buyers that bailed on 10 grand each, non-refundable. But on the flip side, I'm funding a couple deals today. We're going to do some next week. I think it's a little bit more cautious. Everybody's maybe underwriting it a little bit more detail, kind of hone in on those things that Mike Baird talked about last call as well. Like, go back to the fundamentals of your flip. Dean, I know you just posted there. Yeah, I think there's going to be people that are going to cancel, right? Like, that's just going to happen. But I think what's positive is, I've heard a lot of people say about open houses this last weekend, putting houses under contract. It looks like people that are out there are serious, and they're serious buyers. And, you know, a buyer that's buying now, they're buying because of the demand and the lack of supply, right? They need a house. So Jason, now that you're back on, let's hope your audio is a little bit better. Talk a little bit about your successes this last week of deals that, like, you've been doing in the last couple of weeks and how they've worked out.
Yeah. Any better or still just as bad?
You know, it's still kind of bad, but it's not super annoying. Let's just roll with it. It's all good.
All right, well, we'll roll with it. Okay, and I'll be you can tell I'm new to this whole space. I'll be more technologically ready for next time.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so successes. So the timing worked out well, but I had 5 pretty good wholesales that I sent out. They were all kind of the things that most investors are looking for. Your standard 2,000 home in Eagle Mountain, and then like 60s, 70s homes in West Valley, Kearns, Magna, and then a tri-multi-level in Roy, right? So like 5 of your ideal homes. I sold all 5 of those for similar prices, what I would have before. But I think part of the key is being prepared and working through it, right? So for example, the one on West Valley, you know, I did the walkthrough. I had all the buyers. The first buyer's lender said, "Hey, I don't have money anymore. I'm not lending," right? And he couldn't come up with another lender that could do the terms that he wanted. The backup buyer was cash. It was just a tiny little hiccup. So has there been repercussions from the market and people backing out? You bet. I mean, the 2 that you and I talked about, I've had a buyer or 2 even on those 5 back out. But the thing is, I set up my business such that it wasn't going to have as big of an effect on me, where we could roll to the next person whose lender either was ready to go or who was cash. Right. In terms of the retail market, I've listed, I had a flip that had been sitting on the market for a little while in East Layton that went under contract about the time this whole thing started to happen, like end of last week. And then I just listed a home last Friday in Clearfield, and I wound up going 7,000 over asking, which I think is a good chunk more probably than what it would appraise for. So, I mean, so far in terms of like basic market fundamentals, everything's still going well, and we're still continuing to have sellers sell us properties as well. Yeah, so that's my success.
So what have you seen in the last couple of weeks from, and one, I think it's again important, Clay talked about this last week as well, another wholesaler, like his first comment on the call was like, I'm like doubling down on my marketing dollars, right? Like that was his biggest thing, is like, that is something I'm not stopping. So where some of us are not wholesalers, but where, like, think about where can you be doubling down, even if it's not marketing dollars. Is it phone calls you're making? Is it, you know, we can all be doubling down on what our highest producing, you know, lead generation source is, whether it's networking or whatever, being on the phone with people. But what's been your response from sellers in the last couple of weeks? Are you seeing a little bit of a different mindset of what sellers are willing to do or not do versus maybe a month ago? This is where there's going to be opportunities, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. So for sure, sellers are more motivated now than they have been in the past, right? The person that was waiting around for a reason to sell is selling. For that person who's sitting on the news, who's sitting watching the news all day, whose stocks have gone down 20-30%, they're looking at this vacant home or this rental, and they're like, oh shoot, I was trying to time the top of the market, it looks like it's now. Like, there are all sorts of sellers like that now is the time, and they're interested in selling. Even like I've worked with quite a few other investors as well who are partway through a flip or who are planning on doing a flip, and who are like, you know what, honestly, in this market circumstance, like, and even I've done it. There are homes that fit my ideal portfolio and things that don't, right? That home I mentioned before in Eagle Mountain, I owned it. I was intending on flipping it. But I am in Western Weaver County. It's in Eagle Mountain. So I decided, you know what? This home doesn't fit my ideal portfolio in the event of a market correction. I really don't want to own a rental all the way down in Eagle Mountain. So I am going to wholesale it. And I chose to make a duplex in Brigham City that I was planning on wholesaling a flip instead. And so I found good opportunity with other people where, hey, maybe this one doesn't fit their exact inventory for long term, to be able to help them sell it. But in the end, anybody that you've been in contact with, whether it be realtors, whether it be sellers, whether it be other investors, realize that like things have changed for a lot of people. And so I would double down on talking to as many people as you can and making sure that the message is clear of what you're doing and how you can help.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Ben, any takeaways from what Jason just talked about?
Yeah, one thing I want to dive into is he said that sellers have kind of changed their mindset a little bit already. And I want to dive into that. This is kind of a win that I had this morning. My sister owns an Airbnb property back east. She had it under contract for $160,000, I think. And just this morning, I got off the phone with her and convinced her to accept an offer at 153. And so really focus on what you're marketing. And that's a huge win. I think a lot of people in this chat have only been investing since before the last downturn. So they're kind of used to like, okay, I project out what this deal makes sense for me. Because we're all sellers too, most of us. What this deal makes sense for me, and that the deal makes sense when I sell it for $300,000. That's what I'm going to get. And then we've been listing it at $310 and selling it for $318. Well, you know, I'm not going to predict the market. I'm not a timing guy. I don't believe in timing the market, but you got to know your deals. You got to know your portfolio, what makes sense for your portfolio. And when it's time to move on a deal, you know, especially the deals you already have, it might not be what you were expecting, but be smart, know what makes sense, and move on.
Awesome. And, you know, I'm referring back to some of the calls from last week. Mike Baird nailed that too. So just to reinforce what he mentioned, one thing he's doing is, and this will maybe go to a question John Maxim just had, Jason, what do you think the next 3 months looks like? And follow up what I was saying about what Mike said is like, it's probably not a bad idea to discount your ARV 5 to 10% going forward, right? Like, and if you discount it and you still get the deal and it makes sense, how much better of a deal is it going to be if the market still is holding where it's at? But how much more protected are you going to be, Ben, is if the market does cool off a little bit then you still have a deal that's going to pencil. Now, what you're going to find is you may not get as many deals right now until maybe the wholesale prices come down a little bit. But anyway, Jason, John Maxim wants to know, predict the future, right? Which is dangerous to do. So you obviously can't predict the future, but predict what you're going to be continuing to do. And some of this is going to be reiterating what you just said, I guess, to kind of finish up this call.
Can I marry the Mike's questions?
Please.
Because I think that I think that the two belong together, right? Because
Great.
there's a couple of things that are going to change and adjust, right? And this is why Ben's watching the right thing on coronavirus cases, right? Because this coronavirus thing, even in Utah, goes one of two ways, right? It goes South Korea or it goes Italy, based off of how well we're doing at handling quarantining, et cetera, right? So, I mean, obviously, if we're in quarantine for 6 weeks or 6 months, that's going to have a huge impact on my answer, right? Like,
Yeah.
if we can all be good in quarantine for 6 weeks and get out of this, it's not going to have nearly the same economic impact that all of us being in quarantine for 6 months as people everywhere. So, the answer is that's one thing I'm watching. So let's assume best case scenario, let's assume it's the 6 week thing, right? I think another key thing that I'm watching closely, which I called and talked to Mike about early today, is I'm watching the Matt Strongs, the Mike Bairds, the Bob Nashes, who I think Bob's on here too, the major hard money lenders in our area. You guys have a huge control over the market, because so 2008 I was on my mission. So I didn't live through it like Ben did, but I studied it intensely. And it seems like in 2008, the main thing that lacked was money for deals, more so than it was opportunity, more so even than it was desire from people to do it. It was money. So I'm watching the money to make sure that lenders are still lending. And I mean, sure, people may not be quite as aggressive today as they were 2 months ago, but all of those names that I mentioned, and basically with few exceptions, every major hard money lender I know is still lending just a little bit more conservatively. So at the point that hard money lenders stop lending, I'm watching a little bit closer, because that's going to impact my wholesale business quite a bit. Assuming hard money lenders are continuing to lend, assuming it's a short-term blip, I think that real estate is minimally affected. I think that I don't even know that housing prices drop 5 to 10%. I think that and this is in terms of like the wholesale market, same thing, retail market, if we're talking a 6 week down and up, I don't know that there's a huge impact even on what things are selling for, especially at the low end of the market. Obviously, another principle is the high end of the market is much more sensitive and going to be affected much more than the low end of the market. But let's say this thing turns into a 3-4 months, we get into more of a even 5-6 months. You know, stock market's down more, unemployment is higher. All of those things are going to have an impact on a fundamentally strong real estate market. So unemployment is a number that I'm watching. A number that I'm watching very closely is, what am I wholesaling properties for? And then another number that I'm watching closely is what's days on market for flips, and what's the percentage between what a home was listed for and what it sold for. I would say those are probably more, those are some of the most important numbers to be watching. And I am not cashing out equity in certain rental portfolio holdings. I haven't needed to yet, but that is equity that I could cash out.
Those are great points. One thing I'll add to that, and I'm going to be listing a home Friday in kind of Sugar House area. And what I pay really close attention to when I'm comping houses these days, and the MLS is so powerful. I always comp houses, and then I go to the map. I go to the map function to draw like where my area is. I used to just do like, numerical boundaries, like say 13th south to 21st south, 7th east to, whatever. But those maps you can, kind of carve out your comp area are so powerful. And then when you see those, you see the green, yellow, and red dots pull up that show you what percentage are either active, under contract, or sold or backup, right? I love seeing that. I mean, the house that I'm looking at listing, there's like 30 comparables in the last 6 months, and there's one green and the rest are all red. So pay attention to where you're at with supply and demand, right? And then those are going to be good homes to maybe, John, focus on flipping or getting up for sale as quick as you can, because you were competing in a macro market of the Wasatch Front, but then we're also competing on the little neighborhood markets, right? Like, so what is your competition in that price range in your little neighborhood? And pull up and be really careful about what you're looking at as far as the active contracts and sold in that little area. We are going to run out of time. We could go on for days. Ben, give me any follow-up comments you have for this. Then I'll give you guys each like kind of a quick 1 minute sign off. I'll do the same thing. I like to keep these to an hour because I want to respect everyone's time. And Ben, go for it.
So predicting the future is a little impossible. So Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs have both recently come out with predictions, and lots of much smarter people than me have come out, have put their effort into those. Goldman Sachs is currently saying that they think we're going to end up at a 24 to 25% unemployment rate. That's great. That's Great Depression times. Wells Fargo has said a 14%. So predicting the future study the smartest minds and see what they're saying, but don't worry about predicting the future. In the resources, I've added a Steve Jobs commencement speech at like a Stanford thing. And he says, it's impossible to look forward and connect the dots. He talks about how he founded Apple and how it worked for him. You just have to have faith in God, karma, the universe, whatever your faith is. You have to have faith in it, and you have to just keep working, because those dots, when you get there and you look back, the dots will connect. I did not perform very well during the last recession, but my net worth is at least 5 or 6 times higher than it was before that started. And so you can't connect the dots. Just keep working, keep learning. The last thing I would say is, if you can read The Snowball, it's a biography, an authorized biography about Warren Buffett. He talks about how he worked his way through multiple recessions. And what you'll see is early in his life, the first recession that really hit him was 69. In 1969, he was worth $16 million, which was a lot of money back then. But in 1975, he was worth $18 million. He didn't go anywhere for 6 years. And this is the best investor of certainly our time. But then he figured it out. And if you learn how he did it, is he bought Geico and he bought a company called Blue Stamps. And those were both great cash flowing companies. He calls it float. So if I were you and you don't have your cash flow where you need it to be to cover your nut, whatever your nut is, get your cash flow there. Because once Warren Buffett did that, within a decade, he was buying companies for $700 million, from 16 million to $700 million. That's what he was buying companies for. That was his cash that he was throwing down to buy a company. It wasn't what he was worth. So once you figure out how to cover your nut, you will be fine. So figure out cash flow. Go do it right now. If you're not there, go do your numbers for your business and for your personal. If you're not there yet, murder somebody to get to your cash flow. And that's not my legal advice. To get to your cash flow number, and then you will be empowered to make smart decisions.
Getting out of the rat race, right? You know, okay, Ben, we're going to take that as your final thoughts. That was so good. Jason, give it to us to end here.
That's my book number 1 that I'm working on reading. I've got The Power of Full Engagement and Snowball, and it's excellent. I agree. Long and deep. Yeah, there it is. Good job. Long and detailed, but very, very good. So my final thoughts. If you look at the times of the largest shift of wealth, whether it be from people, from the largest times of shift of wealth, whether it be in a country, whether it be a portion of market share from one person to the other, we're all constantly doing little battles for market share, right? Times like this is when there are significant shifts in market share. It's times like this when companies come out way ahead or companies fall behind. these are some of the most exciting times we've ever had. Like, if you're not, change your fear to gratitude, and change your fear to love. And another one, those are the two that people talk about all the time, but I would say change your fear to excitement. If you're not waking up a little bit excited every day, you're not doing it all the way right. Because like, now is the time when you can take so much market share, when you can help so many people, when you can do so much good. And honestly, it's like, look at it like a game. Like, you got this thing that you need to conquer that's constantly changing and coming at you a little bit different every day, and figure out how to shift and adjust and stay ahead of it and everything else. And I promise you'll do better. There's a healthy level of stress. I was just talking about this with one of my acquisition managers. You know, we're putting the pressure on across the whole company, right? We're not jogging anymore. We're at more of a sprint. And I've got one acquisition manager who's not taking it super well. And he's like, there comes a point where you get stressed, where like your brain's not working right, you're not thinking well, and you're not making smart choices and things like that. Figure out how to balance that desire to push a little extra and do a little more without putting yourself into a frantic state. But realize, like, these are exciting times. Yes, it's unknown, but if with a few right choices and showing up and giving it your all every day, we're going to be okay. We're going to make it. We're in it together.
I love it. You guys, this is like a walk-off. I'm not even going to add anything else. Ben and Jason, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for everyone for joining us. I'm going to share this on Facebook. We're going to include all these resources and books and suggestions. Keep interacting with each other, you know, keep staying positive. And I thought I had one or two good ideas, but I think I have a lot more than that. And I want to end it with what Jason said, because I think it's freaking awesome. Change your fear to excitement. Change your fear to excitement. I think that is so awesome. That was a great quote, Jason. Everybody, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll see you out there in the real world, and then keep crushing it. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.